Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Since we have actually audience online, I should start right away. So it is great to be back again here in Warsaw at the 9th Global Forum on Nicotine. My name is Grzegorz Król, and I would like to welcome you all. Welcome to those with us here in Warsaw. Welcome back to those who were with us in the previous years. And finally, welcome to the international audience online. The theme for this year is tobacco harm reduction, here for good. Harm reduction through safer nicotine products can hasten the end of smoking and other risky tobacco use. GFN'22 will explore the science behind the approach, the policy and regulatory changes needed to maximize its potential, as well as the barriers to its implementation around the world. The event is taking place here in Warsaw, but being also watched globally. Selected sessions, including this one, are being streamed live with simultaneous translation into Spanish. People smoke for the nicotine, but they die from the tar. You will hear that phrase again today, and certainly over the next 2 days. It is as true today as it was half a century ago when Michael Russell used it for the first time in a BMJ article. This event, the Michael Russell Oration, is in memory of Michael Russell. You will hear more about him from Professor Jerry Stimson later today, while I would now like to say a few words about the person who will deliver this year's oration, Konstantinos Farsalinos. A physician and a highly cited research associate at the University of Patras and the University of West Attica in Greece. His field of expertise is public health. He is in the top 0.1% of scientists with the highest global research impact in the past decade, according to the Web of Science. Konstantinos authored the first systematic review on e-cigarette safety in 2014. He has published so far approximately 100 studies and articles in international peer-reviewed scientific journals, mostly about smoking, tobacco harm reduction, and alternative to smoking nicotine products. In recent time, he responded promptly to the need of the times, extending his focus to the relationship between smoking, nicotine, and COVID-19. With 10 peer-reviewed articles on the topic published so far. Listing just the major bullet points from his professional bio would take more time than we have for the whole oration, so let me finish my introduction by welcoming Konstantinos Farsalinos to give the 9th Michael Russell Oration. Welcome.
It's an amazing honor. Thank you very much, Jerry and everyone, for this invitation. I know, Jerry, that I promised that I will keep the 29.5-minute limit. Unfortunately, I won't be able to adhere to this promise. That was a promise given before I completed my presentation. So I always have this issue. So can someone upload my presentation here at least? Okay. That's the title of my presentation. It's not going to be about data like you're used to from me. It's about tobacco control and the conduct of tobacco control. Science, scientism, prejudice, and ethics in tobacco control. As the famous sociologist Ulrich Beck said back in 1986 in his German first edition book, we are living in the age of the risk society. And by risk society, he means that modern society has become a risk society, in the sense that it is increasingly occupied with debating, preventing, and managing risk that it itself has produced, unlike previous centuries when the risk was usually naturally derived from nature. And one of the unfortunate developments of modern age was the development of the automatic rolling cigarette machine, the so-called Bonsack machine in 1883, which resulted in the propagation of the smoking habit throughout the world. How do we manage and address risk in modern societies? Well, in science we trust. Or should we? We need to differentiate trust from faith. Faith is blindly believing without any supportive evidence, or even contrary to available evidence, based on emotion and by submitting intellect, by being intellectually by showing intellectual humility. It's a typical case of religion. We have faith in religion. But the difference with trust is that trust is observational based and conditional upon the character, the actions, the honesty, and several other factors of an organization or a person, depending on whether you trust a person or an organization. Trust can be earned or lost. It shouldn't be taken for granted. It's irrational and self-destructive to trust without scrutiny. It's very limiting and would stifle one's intellectual development if you immediately dismiss everything that someone says as irrelevant or contrary to reality. And let's not forget the motto of the Royal Society, which is nullius in verba. Take nobody's word for it. Look for the evidence yourself. Don't take anything from granted because you trust someone who says that. With tobacco control, it basically acts in this modern risk society as a risk management and risk regulation instrument or industry, if you prefer, addressing smoking, but is it smoking or tobacco use in general, or nicotine use? Is it about the health effects of tobacco use and smoking, or about morality and behavior of use? These are questions that we are going to address later in the presentation. There are various organizations and, of course, individual scientists that participate in this instrument or industry. Example of organizations are the WHO, the CDC, the FDA, the local public health authorities in every country. Tobacco control uses science, or that's what they say, to identify, examine, analyze, quantify, and resolve the relevant risk associated with smoking, tobacco use, or whatever they prefer to call it. And they did a good job in identifying and quantifying risk. We have for decades the landmark report, starting from the Royal College of Physicians in 1962 and the Surgeon General in 1964. And over time, we know very well, not only us, but also the general population, about the risks associated with smoking. But how about addressing and resolving the problem? Well, I don't think that they've made a good job there, because today we have more than 1 billion smokers. There has been a lot of progress when you look at prevalence of smoking as a proportion of the population, but the number of smokers worldwide is tremendous. So we're having a huge problem, and there should be scrutiny about the outcome. Now, there is a mixed, confusing, or according to others, very clear interaction between tobacco harm reduction and the tobacco control community or industry. The FCTC clearly mentions harm reduction as part of a strategy to combat smoking. But the real application of harm reduction in smoking from the WHO or even from other organizations has been minimal and largely unacceptable, with some exceptions, of course, usually individual exceptions, I mean persons, scientists, and in some rare case organizations like, for example, the leading example of the UK in the Public Health England. But harm reduction in general, not only relevant to smoking, but to any other harm, is not only about reducing the harm from substance use. It's also about addressing stigma, marginalization, criminalization, inequalities, oppression. It is about protecting the dignity, not only the health, the liberty, including the liberty of making informed decisions and choices as a person. That's from the National Harm Reduction Coalition. Tobacco harm reduction is also a human rights issue, because the WHO Ottawa Charter for Health Promotion in 1986 clearly states that people cannot achieve their fullest health potential unless they are able to take control of things which determine their health. And public health and the authorities need to ensure people's access to reliable information, not just to information, and to tools, in our case, products too, that help them promote their health. So it's a human rights issue besides everything else. And it was more than 30 years ago that the father of tobacco harm reduction, Professor Michael Russell, discussed about continuous use of nicotine products as long-term substitutes for smoking in non-medical practice, as consumer products. And he realized very early, this is a publication in 1991 in the British Journal of Addiction, he realized very early that such products need to be palatable and acceptable. That's if the smoker doesn't like a product, how can he use the product as a smoking substitute? It's impossible. I mean, it's common sense, let's be honest. And these products will need to be endorsed by the health authorities. There must be some incentives, including price incentives, tax advantages. That was 1991. So today, after more than 30 years, unexpectedly, I mean, if you consider common sense as the expected outcome, we have a growing, an overwhelming, and authoritarian, restrictive, prohibitory approach by the tobacco control about tobacco harm reduction, to the point of equating tobacco cigarettes with those lower risk, combustion-free harm reduction products. We have a clear violation of the principle of risk proportionate regulation. We have a clearly prohibitory agenda based on risk aversion and supposed risk elimination. As you understand, what's the risk elimination if people just continue to smoke and are deprived from harm reduction products? There is no risk elimination. So the question is that science? Does it serve the purpose of properly communicating and properly informing the population about scientific facts and the truth? Well, the results are available in science. This is the perception of healthcare professionals in Greece in 2016 about the contribution of nicotine on smoking-related atherosclerosis. 66% believe that nicotine plays an extremely or very important role in smoking-related atherosclerosis. The same proportion had the same answer for smoking-related cancer. Nicotine is not a carcinogen, and these are healthcare professionals. What about citizens, smokers, who are not experts? Even worse, less than 5% of smokers perceive e-cigarettes as substantially less harmful than smoking. That was a study in Greece in 2017, not 30 years ago. E-cigarettes didn't exist 30 years ago. But that's the result of the problematic stance of tobacco control, which has been persistently dogmatic, continuously cherry-picking and frequently misinterpreting evidence. They are attempting to suppress criticism at any cost with ad hominem attacks even to Michael Russell for links with the industry and other even respectable organizations. I've heard people accusing Public Health England of being funded by the tobacco industry for real or imaginative conflicts, of course, without ever presenting any potential issues relevant to the research content itself. the presentation of data, the data interpretation, the data analysis, nothing. Of course, they are also engaged in a fear-mongering campaign based on an extreme application of the precautionary principle. Keep the precautionary principle in mind, emphasizing on potentially devastating for the population, but to a significant extent, purely theoretical, future risks, and continuous uncertainty. We don't know what's going to happen in the next 10 years. This is exactly what we were hearing 10 years ago. Now it's again the next 10 years. They invariably assume that the worst-case scenarios are the only possibility. And here are some examples of this fear-mongering campaign. It's very interesting to look at how carefully they created the name EVALI. E-cigarette or vaping product associated lung injury. So if someone misinterprets e-cigarettes, we add vaping. If someone misinterprets vaping, we add e-cigarettes. Even after they admitted that e-cigarettes and nicotine products had nothing to do with EVALI, they kept the same name. It was very carefully chosen, and it would be naive for someone to think that it was just a coincidence. What about the vaping epidemic of kids using electronic cigarettes? The new vaping epidemic from all mass media, from the Surgeon General, from respectable health organizations in the US. But when you look at the data, the picture is not that clear. First of all, smoking rates have been continuously declining at a very fast rate during the period of increased e-cigarette popularity, which mainly involves experimentation, especially among never-smoking adolescents, as we showed in our study. Frequent, regular, daily use is extremely rare among non-smoking adolescents. And current e-cigarette use among US adolescents is continuously declining too. So there was a trend, mostly of experimentation, and current use is any kind of past 30 days use, even one puff, but it is going down pretty rapidly. So the less we talk about it, the less interested the kids become in trying electronic cigarettes. One of the main weapons of the tobacco control industry is the precautionary better safe than sorry principle, which has very, very serious problems. Failure of objectivity. There is no well-designed and structured procedure that uses the precautionary principle consistently without having cognitive and interest-based biases being involved, emotional reactions, ungrounded public perceptions, pressures from lobbyists, and an unreliable, in general, approach to analysis and forecasting. It's very vague. It distracts from great threats. The heavy emphasis on taking and using the precautionary principle for example, the risks associated with harm reduction products draws attention away from any comparative risk with the real problem, which in our case is smoking. It's risk elimination and risk aversion for the least harmful product that results in greater risks by propagating the more harmful product. The precautionary principle is vague and unclear, very ill-defined. It's extremely variable in interpretation. Ad libidum, it is interpreted and applied ad libidum, as the regulator wants to apply it. Lack of comprehensiveness. A comprehensive decision procedure balances the benefit of restricting a product, an activity, anything, and it uses two factors to make this balance. It addresses the potential benefits of the activity that they want to restrict or prohibit, and the cost, the associated risks of the restrictions, the regulations, and the prohibitions that they want to make. Who is doing that from the tobacco control for harm reduction product? No one. They don't care about that. It's only about this risk of e-cigarettes versus an immense risk of smoking, which they don't care about. They frequently use very frequently, it involves inappropriate burden of proof. Activists, not only scientists, have a favored status when they use the precautionary principle. They can raise an issue even if there is no more evidence than their imagination of any potential theoretical future risks. You don't need to prove that there's a risk. Producing and innovating, and we know that harm reduction products, recent harm reduction products are the results of innovation, become de facto crimes for the precautionary principle fanatics. And those who are involved in production and innovation are guilty until proven innocent. It's asymmetrical because it favors the status quo, and the status quo is to have only one nicotine product available in the market, and that's tobacco cigarettes. So it stifles innovation, it's against progress, and it fails to account that inaction can be equally or even more dangerous than action. It fails to accommodate trade-offs, and it tends towards authoritarianism. No use of even the least harmful product is the only acceptable option for tobacco control fanatics. It's not for all the tobacco control movement, but we know what we're talking about. They appear to protect people from their self. They know better for you than you know what's good for you. It denies individuals the freedom to make trade-offs in a way that is recognized by common sense, basically, when you approximate an issue of risk, harm, and benefit. And it is vulnerable to correction because of its vagueness, because it is very ill-defined, and it's very arbitrary. It appeals to the regulators who enjoy expanding their power and are applying it selectively with any rules they prefer. An increase in corruption of the regulatory power is further ensured by making precaution and prevention the default assumption. They appear as the owners of morality. What we are doing is that we are protecting you. We are selling you protection. So maybe in science we trust, but in a US dollar, printed in a US dollar. As Martin Peterson said in a nice article a few years ago, there's nothing wrong with the precautionary principle as long as it's not used for decision making. He wrote that in 2007. I'm not rejecting completely the precautionary principle, but it can be used ad libitum by the regulators. It gives them unlimited power and no control of what they're doing. So the tobacco control tactics is, as we all know and as I've shown previously, using children as the main persistent slogan, which is, of course, appealing to emotion. And what is emotion? A neural impulse that moves an organism to action, prompting automatic reactive behavior that has been adapted through evolution as a survival mechanism. It's not about science, it's about emotion, it's about instinct. But this, using the kids' argument, creates an intergenerational discrimination and shows complete lack of solidarity and empathy for smokers. We don't care about adults, we care about the kids only. The tobacco control movement has also lost focus. Instead of focusing on the harms caused by smoking, by combustion, they are criticizing the behavior of nicotine use with unprecedented closed-mindedness. Even during the COVID pandemic, when some of us wrote some studies, performed some studies which showed that there is a potential for nicotine to be beneficial for COVID-19. instead of what they should have done, which is focus on smoking-related health harms. And this lost in focus is in reality moral judgment and outright prejudice. Even worse, these characteristics, together with a strong prohibitory agenda, transform the science, it should have been in quotes, produced by tobacco control into a form of an atheistic religion that should be trusted blindly, but that's not trust, that's almost faith. Experts know better than anyone else. They are the owners of scientific truth and even worse, of moral knowledge, the only owners of moral knowledge, of justice and injustice, and they present themselves as representing the sole defenders of human rights. However, that's far from the case. Why? Because they fail to respect individuality, personal dignity, autonomy, values, experience, emotions, preference, and the right of everyone to make informed choices. This is a clear form of scientism. Still, their assertions and certainties are based on past experience with tobacco cigarettes, failing to consider, of course, that we're talking about very, very different products. Despite the fact that the same industry is producing these products, and the prospects of these products are not just to be used as consumer products in the way tobacco cigarettes were used, but they have a strong harm reduction that is beneficial for public health prospect, at least for some individuals, and I think for many individuals, not for some. Many in the tobacco control movement seem to deny the provisional nature of scientific knowledge, that proper skepticism, and keep that in mind, is the foundation of the intellectual process. As a well-known physicist, Richard Feynman, said, science is the belief in the ignorance of experts, not in the knowledge of experts. And when someone says that science teaches us, he's not using the right word. Science doesn't teach, experience teaches. Feynman also discussed about the totality of evidence. Of course, it's interesting and important to hear about experiments, but you have to be patient and listen to all the evidence and then judge whether a sensible conclusion has been arrived at. Uncertainty is central to morality, and science is constructive skepticism. And as Henry Bauer published in 2006 about skepticism, skepticism views the probability of a proposition as always less than 1. So everything is not entirely certainly a reality. Whereas belief or disbelief are absolute. They are asserting that the probability is either 0, disbelief, or 1 for belief. So he created the term microskepticism, which means questioning the soundness of every detail or fact, method, and logic. And microskepticism is empirical. It's based on experience. By contrast, macroskepticism is deductive. It relies on current scientific evidence, so in reality, previously acquired knowledge, which makes it backward-looking and destructively critical, not creatively critical. I'm sure you understand whether the tobacco control is applying microskepticism or macroskepticism. And there are several contemporary examples, that's what he wrote in this paper, where the native conservatism and dogmatism of science have become tyrannies, knowledge monopolies, and research cartels because science has become so much governed by official bureaucracies. And I think that tobacco control appears to be one of those examples. That's my quote, not from Henry Bauer. And I think what the tobacco control does is use the Occam razor of simple is usually the right answer, but there are cases where the simple answers are the wrong answers. In that case, the tobacco control is simply using the past experience with tobacco and smoking in order to address the future risks of harm reduction products. Simple, but very, very wrong. The anti-harm reduction hysteria by tobacco control is becoming an oppressive, intolerant, and authoritarian form of political correctness, not only for smokers, but also for scientists who have different views than they have. And that resembles what Max Weber wrote more than a century ago in his essay about bureaucracies and capitalism. Tobacco control, unfortunately, resembles a bureaucratic giant which concentrates large amounts of power in a small number of people. They tend to generate oligarchy. They create an inescapable fate of further bureaucratization and rationalization, but that's not rational. So in reality, they have created the Max Weber's iron cage inside which we are all allowed to move only inside this iron cage. But that's the pessimistic side of the story. What's the future? For the future, I will use some quotes from another Russell, not Michael Russell, but Bertrand Russell, who is a famous historian, mathematician, philosopher, was famous. And I'm going to use the 10 commandments of critical thinking and democratic decency, which apply perfectly to tobacco control and tobacco harm reduction. He said that the best answer to fanaticism is liberalism. And his decalogue dictates that we should not feel absolutely certain of anything. We do not think it worthwhile to proceed by concealing evidence, for the evidence is sure to come to light. We should never try to discourage thinking, for you are sure to succeed when you try. When you meet with opposition, we've seen fearful opposition, endeavor to overcome it by argument and not by authority, for a victory depends upon authority is unreal and illusory. Have no respect for the authority of others, for there are always contrary authorities to be found. Do not use power to suppress opinions you think are pernicious, for if you do, the opinions will eventually suppress you. Do not fear to be eccentric in opinion, for every opinion now accepted was once eccentric. I think we are facing that, a lot of us. Find more pleasure in intelligent dissent than in passive agreement, for if you value intelligence, as you should, the former implies a deeper agreement than the latter. Be scrupulously truthful, even if the truth is inconvenient, for it is more inconvenient when you try to conceal it. And finally, do not feel envious for the supposed happiness of those who live in a fool's paradise, for only a fool will think that this is happiness. So I think we should follow the guidance of the father of tobacco harm reduction, Professor Michael Russell, and one of the quotes in the Decalogue of Bertrand Russell. Do not fear to be eccentric in opinion, for every opinion now accepted was once eccentric. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Konstantinos. Let me just say that I trust that the data from the feedback forms will confirm my firm belief that the audience has found your oration enlightening, and it has given us all plenty of food for thought. It has for me. Thank you. Kevin Molloy, our friend and colleague, led the Tobacco Harm Reduction Scholarship Program since its conception in 2018, until Kevin's death in 2021. Kevin died of a lung cancer at the age of 63. He inspired the next generation of harm reductionists in the field, which has the potential to change so many millions of lives for the better. He supported scholars from around the world to develop their ideas into projects with measurable impacts, building the evidence base, increasing awareness, and ensuring no one is left behind. The scholarships team wanted to recognize Kevin's contribution to the lives of so many scholars he worked with, and to create a legacy for the future THRSP participants. From this year, the Kevin Molloy Fellowships will act as a living tribute to his work. First 3 professional development fellowships in his name will be awarded in a couple of minutes to rising stars from low and middle income countries to assist them with developing their careers in THR, thus building further global capacity in the field. We are honored that Kevin's wife, Annie Molloy, will present the recipients with their fellowships. Annie, welcome.
Hello. First of all, I'd like to begin by thanking Knowledge Action Change for initiating these fellowship awards in my husband's name. He would have been bowled over, really, really chuffed to have these awards being presented. And I'd also like to thank Knowledge Action Change for inviting me to Warsaw to present these awards. He loved the Global Forum on Nicotine. He really enjoyed this conference. I remember he would always come home really fired up by everything that he'd taken part in. So I think it's really appropriate they're being presented here at this conference. But before I present the awards, I'd like to talk a little bit about Kevin's own professional development. I first met Kevin back in 1989 as an actor. We were both actors working in theatre, and as you know, acting doesn't always pay the rent. It's nice work if you can get it, but occasionally you have to go off and do other things. Kevin had personal experience within the field of drug use and started to work with service users running group sessions in the field of drug harm reduction. Then, in 1995, our first child, Lottie, was born. And the wonderful thing about being a parent or being any kind of carer, nurturer, is that you are no longer the center of your universe. That child is the center of your universe, and that starts to shape your decision-making. And so in 1997, we made the decision to move out of London so that we could afford to buy our own house and Lottie could have her own bedroom. And with that decision, Kevin chose to work full-time within Kent's prisons, delivering drug and alcohol services to the inmates there. Then in 1998, our son Jake was born. And with 2 children comes the need even more to develop yourself in terms of your professional career. And so Kevin made the choice to study for a master's in business administration through the Open University. And I'd like to think that when he made that choice, there was the germ, the seed of these fellowships that are going to be awarded here today. Because it's only through knowledge can we be confident in our actions in order to promote change? And it's the changes that these fellowships are going to initiate that started with Kevin's own professional development. And so, without any further ado, I return to my notes and give some information about the very worthy fellowships. So, the first fellowship is for Sahar Luhunga from Malawi. Sahar is a business consultant who has been advising tobacco farmers about the potential to move to alternative crops. Since being introduced to the scholarship program by Chimwamwe Ngoma in 2019. He has completed his first level and enhanced scholarship. His first scholarship was a documentary film made with Blandina Nahita looking at tobacco use in THR in Malawi. His second project researched snus as an alternative to traditional oral tobacco among rural women in Malawi. For his Kevin Malloy Fellowship, Sahar is undertaking a Master of Arts in Behavioral and Health Change Communication at the Malawi University of Business and Applied Science. The title of his project is Understanding Mechanisms of Behavioral Change in Tobacco Harm Reduction using Interventional Clinical Trials in Malawi. Sahar, I'd like to present you with your award. The second fellowship award goes to Yusuf Adebesi Adebayo from Nigeria. Yusuf is a qualified pharmacist graduating with a first-class honours in 2021. In the same year, he was a recipient of a prestigious Diana Award. As author and co-author of a staggering number of academic papers for his age, Yusuf established the Tobacco Harm Reduction Research Hub in Nigeria as part of his 2021 Enhanced Scholarship. He is a pivotal figure in THR Nigeria, and he is also Director of Research and Thought Leadership for Global Health Focus. For his Kevin Malloy Fellowship, Yusuf has gained a place at Oxford University to study for a Master's of Science in Global Health Science and Epidemiology. The title of his project is Invest in One, Reach Many, Advancing Tobacco Harm Reduction in Africa through Research, Advocacy, and Capacity Building. I'd like to present Yusuf with his award. Our final fellowship goes to Atullah Ahmadi from Afghanistan. Atullah is a medical doctor with a very impressive academic publication record, which he has managed to continue to some extent even after the Taliban takeover in Afghanistan. His first scholarship aimed to establish THR Afghanistan, and although he was forced to make a lot of changes to his plans because of the regime change, he managed to successfully complete it, despite KAC's inability to transfer project funds to him in Kabul after August 2021. He is the Asian Director of Research for Global Health Focus. Atullah has successfully gained a place to study for a Master's in Public Health at EHESP, the School of Advanced Studies in Public Health in Paris. In his application for the Kevin Malloy Fellowship, Atullah said, "Through this fellowship, I aim to become a master of public health, to establish a career in the THR field to help to improve the health and well-being of smokers, and to help to decrease the morbidity and mortality of tobacco-related diseases." The award of the fellowship and the associated funding has enabled Atullah to be successful in gaining a visa to take up his course in Paris in August 2022. As a member of the Hazara minority in Afghanistan, this could be a life-saving as well as a life-changing opportunity for him. Unfortunately, Atullah was unsuccessful in his attempts to gain a visa to attend GFN to receive his award in person. However, fingers crossed, he will be joining us virtually to accept this award. I hope.
To win the prestigious Kevin Malloy Fellowship Award that will fully fund my Master of Public Health program. It is sad that I could not join in person to present it with my award, but I have a good news that I got French visa to start my program in September. As a health researcher and medical doctor, I have been working to improve people's life, health, and well-being in low and middle-income countries, including Afghanistan. And I have been good and successful in my work. And as a KC scholar, I got this opportunity to strengthen my role and approach my goal, and to master advanced skills to approach my goals, and to continue my work in tobacco harm reduction. I would need to pursue my master program. And I'm grateful from Knowledge Action Change that provided this opportunity for me to strengthen my role and to have an opportunity to strengthen my skills in public health research and leadership. And I hope that I will fulfill Kevin Malloy's dream of improving smokers' health and well-being. And thank you all. And once again, special thanks from Knowledge Action Change.
Thank you for the award. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Annie, and let me also congratulate to all three recipients of the fellowship. And now let me hand over to Professor Jerry Stimson, who I hope will reveal who will be the recipient of this year's Michael Russell Award.
Thank you, Grzegorz. There's something very heavy in this box, so I'm going to just put it down for the moment. Thank you, Anne. Congratulations to the scholars, and thank you, Konstantinos, for a truly inspiring presentation tonight. It's great to be back in Warsaw. It's great to be online to the many people who can't be here. I'm led to believe there are people in over 70 countries who are tuning in to GFN online. So at this stage, it's a great pleasure to host another highlight of the GFN conference, which is the presentation of the Michael Russell Award. It honors the work and memory of Mike Russell, who was one of the pioneers of the study of smoking behavior, and it recognizes his insights into the nature of smoking and how to reduce the toll from smoking. As Mike established, it's all about the nicotine. Many of you will be familiar with that quotation from his article in the British Medical Journal in 1976, where he said that people smoke for the nicotine, but they die from the tar. So separating the nicotine from the dirty delivery system is key. He also realized that there were simple consumer-led possibilities to help the switch from smoking. That quote that Konstantinos put up from Mike Russell, talking about palatable and acceptable products actively promoted on the open market to enable them to compete with tobacco products. So that's the essence of harm reduction. It's a pretty simple, straightforward, consumer-led process. So some years back, the Russell family kindly agreed to the establishment of an award in Michael Russell's memory, which are presented each year here at GFN. And the award is established to honor someone who's made a substantial and innovative contribution to the science and understanding of safer nicotine products and tobacco harm reduction. Before we move on to the announcement of this year's award, I'd like to thank Dr. Lars Ramstrong, who was the recipient of the inaugural Michael Russell Award in 2018 for his meticulous analysis of the epidemiology of snus use in his home country, Sweden. Earlier today, Lars allowed us to host the launch of a new piece of research that he conducted during the pandemic, which demonstrates that the national availability of snus is clearly associated with lower rates of mortality attributable to tobacco, whilst country-level implementation of the WHO tobacco control measures is not. You can watch his presentation on the GFN website at gfn.events/new-research. That's GFN events/new research. Thank you, Lars, for the opportunity to host the launch of this revealing study. So now, it gives me great pleasure to announce the winner of the 2022 Michael Russell Award. The 2022 award goes to Professor Brad Rodu. You can stand next to me whilst I embarrass you with some nice comments about your work. Brad's a professor of medicine at the University of Louisville in Kentucky in the US. He's the first holder of an endowed chair in tobacco harm reduction research at the James Graham Brown Cancer Center. For the last 3 decades, he's been involved in research and policy development regarding tobacco harm reduction. And in his early work, he made the public health case for US smokeless tobacco as a way for adult smokers to continue consuming nicotine outside of a medical context and using a product not manufactured by a pharmaceutical company. As he found out, and as many of us have since found out in this field, this view didn't play well with the wider health and tobacco control community. His work, and with his colleagues, on US smokeless tobacco shows that harm reduction options are often kept hidden from smokers. His research has focused on the constituents of smokeless tobacco products, smoking cessation trials using smokeless products, epidemiological studies on smoking and smokeless tobacco use, and perceptions of health risks associated with tobacco products. But his work hasn't remained inaccessible in inaccessible medical journals, in other academic journals. In his 1995 book, for example, way before we had online access to information about safer nicotine products, his book entitled For Smokers Only, How Smokeless Tobacco Can Save Your Life, popularized the evidence. And of course, Brad's work will also be known to many of you through his blog spot on tobacco truth. We've got two organizations with truth in the title, but Brad's blogspot is the true one rather than the other one that claims to be truth. It's an amazing repository criticizing bad science and bad policy. Many of you will know how he exposed the fundamental errors in Stanton Glantz's study on vaping and heart attacks, which was published in the Journal of the American Heart Association. Glantz claimed that vaping led to heart attacks. Brad dug into the raw data and found that at least 11 of the 38 heart attack victims had suffered their heart attacks before they started vaping, some as many as 10 years before. So Glantz would have us believe that e-cigarettes are so bad that they can cause health problems back in time, even before people start vaping. So Brad's challenge with other tobacco researchers led to that journal article being retracted, and that's no mean feat. It's a rare but a significant event and triumph. So Brad epitomizes everything that's good in the field of tobacco harm reduction: follow the evidence, popularize the evidence, and tenaciously criticize fake science and flawed policy. So Brad, on behalf of everyone here and those watching online, and all those around the world who know about your work, I'm pleased to present you with the 2022 Michael Russell Award. This will weigh down your luggage on your flight home. It's very okay. I'll put it here for you for now. So, thank you. Let me go this way.
Jerry said it was okay to make a couple comments, but I understand I'm nervous because I understand I'm the only thing separating you all from the party, so I will make it very brief. I'm very grateful to all the GFN staff and everyone who organizes this meeting. I attended in 2019. I found it absolutely fantastic. And I especially want to note Jerry, Patty, and Jess as far as their cooperation and their work in getting me here and this award. I also want to do something a little different. I want to have this honor be shared by 4 people that you won't even know. They are people who supported me from the beginning and for many, many years, often without compensation. The first is a man named Bill Sklar. You've never heard his name, but you've always seen his work, because Bill was a silent editor on my book. He has literally edited every single publication I've made to newspapers and all 660 plus blog posts. He's been the editor that's kept me in check. And he's just a wonderful friend and colleague. He worked for free from about 1994 to 1999. And in order to do so, I promised him all the royalties from my book. And you know how much money he made from those. Absolutely zero. But Bill's been a wonderful friend. The second is Don Miller. He is a medical oncologist. And he was at UAB, the University of Alabama, Birmingham, when I was. And I brought him my first draft of my first paper, and he thought it was remarkable, and he promised to help. And he helped me there for 5 years, and then he moved to become director of the Cancer Center at the University of Louisville. And he recruited me there because when he arrived, he could not believe the lines of patients with lung cancer in Kentucky, the heaviest smoking state in the United States. And he said, Brad, we need new thinking to try to prevent all of these diseases and deaths. And so he recruited me to the University of Louisville, where I got to spend 100% of my time, as opposed to 50, doing only tobacco harm reduction research. The third person is Philip Cole. He is a star cancer epidemiologist who was recruited to UAB from Harvard, where he was chairman. Phil came to UAB about the same time I did, and when I wrote my first paper, I gave it to the cancer center director. He wanted to get rid of me pretty quickly. So he said, take it to Phil Cole. He knew Phil Cole had no tolerance for BS. And so I took it to Phil Cole with a red pen attached, and Phil took 3 weeks. And he came back and he said, Dr. Radu, I've read your paper. I can't destroy it, so I'm here to help you. Those are famous last words that you can say to me. And for the next 20 years, he helped me. He gave me a PhD without the degree in epidemiology. He taught me so much. He was a remarkable collaborator and serves as a co-author on many of my papers. And finally, when Phil retired and he unlisted his telephone number, no, just kidding. I had to search for other technical expertise. And so I looked and looked for an epidemiologist, public health someone who could help me with the more technical matters. No luck. Nobody wanted to work in this area, so I turned to the economics field. They're more driven toward numbers with less emotion. And I found a brilliant economics researcher by the name of Nantaporn Plurfenswat. She's originally Thai. She did a PhD here at the University of Chicago, Illinois, or University of Illinois, Chicago. A wonderful researcher, a great communicator. And for those in the field professionally, I want to warn you, don't even think about trying to recruit her, okay? I'm not going to let her go. So those are the 4 people, and they've been a marvelous team to help me accomplish whatever we've been able to accomplish. Now, I want to say my reaction, I was stunned when Jerry wrote me that first email and told me about the award. I was absolutely stunned to think that my name might be in the same universe as Michael Russell's. I couldn't believe it. As a pathologist, when I first came into this field, I had no background in epidemiology, tobacco, public health, or any of the fields that you all are in. And so I had to learn very quickly, but I knew one thing. I knew how to list in my publications great references to classic work. And in that first publication, I listed 2 of Michael Russell's classic citations in The Lancet. He was brilliant, and he had much to offer. And then when I wrote another paper in 2006, the number was up to 4 publications, 3 Lancet, 1 British Medical Journal. It's amazing that at that time that I would ever think that I would be in any way eligible for this kind of award or follow people like Lars Ramström and David Abrams. But I'm very, very grateful. And, just one more thing. I said to Jerry, I'm going to give you another week because I want you, I'm an American and we challenge elections. Just saying, okay? But I told Jerry that I wanted to flip the script and challenge my own election to this award to make sure it was accurate, okay, and valid. And it was. And, the other thing I'm thinking, you get awards like this when your family's voting. Okay? And I have a brother and a devoted wife and 2 devoted children. It would have been a tie vote at best. I wouldn't have won. So I'm really, really grateful and so happy that I've received this award. And now it's time to party. Thank you very much.
go. So.
Oh, thank you, Brad. That's great. Thank you very much. Okay, so that's the end of this lovely opening session for the conference, and very soon we have the conference party. Some of you who've been here before will know where it is, and you can help people who haven't been here before to find it, but it's in the Sphinx restaurant, which is in the same block as the Marriott. And I think probably the easy way to find it is to sort of go out the main entrance of the Marriott, turn left again, and then look for the sign for the Sphinx. It's within about 200 meters. And to gain entry, you do need to wear your conference badge. As you can see, I've got mine on here. So please wear your conference badge to gain admission, or you have to argue with the bouncers and have to fetch somebody else to let you in. So thank you for being here this evening. Thank you for all the speakers tonight for such a great start, and have a great time here in Warsaw and for the rest of the conference. Thank you.